The passengers came crowding into the restaurant car and took their seats. They all bore more or less the same expression, one of expectancy mingled with apprehension. The inspector cleared his throat. Ahem, Monsieur et Madame, we are here to investigate the death of Mr. Fragilis, alias Bacteroides. Now you all know the facts of the case. Mr. Fragilis was found stabbed this morning, an abdominal trauma of the most macabre nature. Let this remind you of polymicrobial infections, such as intra-abdominal infection, when coverage for anaerobes is of vital importance. Indeed, metronidazole is active against a broad array of anaerobes, but its coverage also extends to certain protozoal infections. So, using method, order, and the little gray cells, we will consider the clinical indications of metronidazole one by one, and I will propose to you a solution to this crime. First, metronidazole's mechanism of action. As you all know, the train came to an unexpected halt early this morning because of a break in the track. But this was no accident. Upon closer inspection, I noticed its double helix design, bearing a striking resemblance to bacterial DNA. Metronidazole forms toxic-free radical metabolites in the cell that disrupt DNA, a bactericidal mechanism. And it is through similar oxidation-reduction reactions that the track corroded from rust, making complete demolition of the track a rather simple task. After that time, it was impossible for anyone to leave the train. We must therefore seek the truth within, not without, for the murderer is among us at this very moment. He paused. It was at this time the conductor arrived, as instructed, and placed a "Do Not Enter" sign at the entrance of the restaurant car. This sign was an exact replica of the "Do Not Enter" sign from the Entamoeba histolytica excavation, a case the inspector had worked in Mexico many years prior. Entamoeba is an intestinal protozoa that causes amoebic dysentery and liver abscess. The inspector knew quite well that metronidazole was effective in treating this intraluminal infection, as well as another protozoa he had encountered in Mexico that very same year. Eh bien, let us start with Colonel Giardia. Colonel Giardia raised his eyebrows sardonically, clearly annoyed at being implicated in this whole affair. The colonel was an Englishman, returning home on leave from Central America. You are aware, Colonel, that you are the only passenger in this carriage who carries the native protozoan shield, characteristic of the Giardia jungle tribe. The same infection carried by international travelers, causing the acute, watery diarrhea, what we call le diarrhée gay. Colonel Giardia, uninterested in what a pack of foreigners called anything, replied with true British brevity. Yes. This exact shield was found next to our victim at the very moment he was discovered. Yet Mr. Trichomonas produced an alibi, for at the time of the murder he was seen drinking with you in the dining car. Mr. Trichomonas was a big, flamboyant American. He had a fleshy, coarse-featured face with a good-humored expression, and just as his Trichomonas surname implied, he enjoyed tricks, for he was a magician. He was holding in his hand a hat, from which he pulled a strawberry. It resembled the greenish discharge and strawberry cervix of vaginitis, caused by protozoal infection. His partner accompanied him, reminding the inspector that metronidazole is administered to both patient and partner when treating this sexually transmitted infection. We will see, Mr. Trichomonas, if your alibi, as you say in your country, holds water. No? The inspector paused, looking at his audience. Not a single member noticed his obvious and jocular reference to the wet mount, a test utilized to inspect for the characteristic mobile trophozoites. The inspector, of course, was used to his sophisticated Belgian humor going unnoticed. Let us move on, then, from vaginitis to vaginosis. His attention turned to Miss Gardiner. She sat upright. She was one of the ugliest old ladies he had ever seen. It was an ugliness of distinction. It fascinated rather than repelled. Clasped in her hands was, improbable though it seemed, a single Venus flytrap of the Gardnerella vaginalis species. It was a bacterial species the inspector knew well. This very same vaginosis-evoking Venus flytrap was found among our victim's luggage. Mais non! Rest assured, madame, like the fishy odor that accompanies bacterial vaginosis, I detect the smell of but a red herring. She listened to the inspector in silence, her small, toad-like face quite impassive. Her gaze went past him, out of the window. And suddenly, as if summoned by her glance, a helicopter appeared over the masses of snow. Helicobacter pylori, the inspector recalled, was most commonly treated with triple therapy consisting of a PPI, amoxicillin, and clarithromycin. Metronidazole, however, can be substituted for amoxicillin in penicillin-allergic patients. Eh bien, what timing, the inspector said with a twinkle in his eye. The Helicobacter helicopter arrives to retrieve our poor victim, just as we arrive at the evidence of our last suspect, Mademoiselle Clostridium, le femme anaerobique. The woman opposite the inspector was a mere girl, 20 at a guess. The inspector had studied her from afar when first boarding the train. She had a beautiful, foreign-looking face, dead white skin, large brown eyes, jet black hair, now curiously concealed behind a gas mask. The inspector recognized this mask as a symbol for anaerobic infection. Metronidazole, he knew quite well, exerted potent bactericidal activity against numerous anaerobic species. Clindamycin above the diaphragm, metronidazole below. A common saying in your country, is it not, mademoiselle? Miss Clostridium said nothing. She held in her manicured hands with deep red nails a small child who occupied himself with a chocolate fountain at the end of the restaurant car. The chocolate cascaded down the tablecloth, resembling the pseudomembranous colitis and diarrhea caused by Clostridium, for which metronidazole was the treatment of choice. It was through the careful utilization of the little gray cells that the identity of the murderer became undoubtedly clear. Abdominal trauma, leading to polymicrobial infection, the work of none other than the anaerobes, Bacteroides, Prevotella, Fusobacterium, and of course, Clostridium. All eyes turned to Miss Clostridium. If you will come with me, mademoiselle. As she rose, a bottle of alcohol slipped from her small, tight-fitting black coat. She was overcome with nausea, and she detected an unusual metallic taste in her mouth. Ingestion of alcohol during metronidazole therapy, administered orally or vaginally, would result in a disulfiram-like reaction, characterized by flushing, tachycardia, palpitations, nausea, and vomiting. This drink, the inspector mused, would surely be her last. And so, the case of the murder on the Metro Express was closed.